Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another session of the second Wednesday series by Foster Swift. Again, my name is Paul Millenbach, and with me today are a couple of Foster Swift attorneys, of course, Lindsey Mead, who you may remember from last month. We had a good session on cybersecurity, and she's going to talk a little bit more about that today in the context of estate planning and working with senior citizens and that sort of thing. And Lindsey, again, is an attorney in our Lansing office. And we also have Matt Fedor, who specializes, amongst many things, specializes in estate planning as well and is very well versed in the topic. And the subject today is due to our impending holiday of Thanksgiving, a couple of weeks away from now. We want to discuss about estate planning, because those issues can arise when families get together. And then they're passing the turkey or passing the gravy or whatever. And there might be some discussion about estate planning and the importance of it as it relates to the senior citizens in the room, or maybe the senior citizens that are not in the room. And we just want to go over a couple of things that we thought that you might find helpful. And the first one would be just basic estate planning. And what I would turn this over to Matt in terms of what are the basics, important documents involved in the basics of estate planning, or things that people should know to have a basic understanding of as what they should do as it relates to senior citizens and their own estate plans. Matt?
Sure. Thanks, Paul. So that's one of the questions I get a lot is, do I have an estate plan? What's an estate plan? And really an estate plan is a plan for what to happen to your stuff and who you want to be in charge. And it takes the form of a lot of different stuff. The most common would be, like a will or a trust, but it's more than just the documents. It's really having a plan as to what to do with your assets if you become incapacitated or if you pass away. So an estate plan really comprises three things. One is the documents, and I'll talk about those in a minute. The second part is what we call funding, or reviewing the titling of assets, reviewing the beneficiary designations, and really making sure that the assets are in the proper form to benefit or to go where you want it to go. So one of the things that we do is we ask the clients to give us an assessment of all of their assets and what they want to have happen to them. And there's different ways to get the assets to the people you want to. But the other thing that we talk about is what happens if you become incapacitated. So a will is great, but it only works if you're deceased. So the other big important thing is what if you become incapacitated, or if you have a mental infirmity, right? So dementia, Alzheimer's, we're seeing a lot more of those diseases in our society. And what do you do with your stuff if you still need it to survive? So that's kind of the analysis that we go through. But when you're talking about meeting with family, whether you have an estate plan or not is a pretty easy answer. You do or you don't. But the other thing that we try to get clients to do is to manage the expectations of the family members. So, and along with the planning process of it, we also deal with disputes, right? After people are gone, or if they can't participate in their own affairs anymore. Most of the disputes arise because the family members' expectations weren't met. They didn't know what mom or dad wanted. They didn't know if, who was going to get what, like who was going to get the family dishes that they use every year at the holiday. So setting the expectations is one of the most important things you can do around the Thanksgiving Day holiday. And explaining, either asking mom or dad or grandpa or grandma what it is they want, what they have planned, who gets what, and I've got clients that have made a list. We recommend that clients make a list if you want specific items to go to specific people. But a lot of people just have their kids come in and put sticky notes on stuff. So there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just one of those things where you have to talk about it. And if everyone understands what the expectations are, then their expectations will be met, and it will reduce the amount of fighting that goes on down the road.
Matt, do you find when discussing these issues with your clients that the setting expectations, do you find that you may get a call shortly after the holidays about those expectations, about some of the statements that were made to the effect that the parent may say, I'm going to give you the dresser and I'm not going to give you my car. And the people get upset about that and then contact you in that context.
Yeah, that's probably our busiest time of year. That's usually when families get together. In January, the phone starts ringing or the emails start coming in. But the other part that's important is a lot of people avoid that discussion, right? Because they don't want to offend one child or they don't want to offend a family member. So they just don't talk about it. And even if they don't want to talk about it because they're afraid of that confrontational meeting, write it down. And that's really what we can help clients do, right? Through a trust or a will, a list of gifts. Writing down your wishes is the most important thing, because if you've ever had a loved one pass away, one of the first things that goes through your mind is, what would they want? What funeral arrangements do they want? What do they want to have happen to your stuff? Who do they want to get your assets? Who needs it more? So when you write it down, it takes all that guesswork out. So having that dialogue sometimes is difficult. So the alternative is to go see an attorney and write it down. Get your paperwork in place. So, I talked about a will. A will only handles assets that are solely in your name and only if you're deceased, right? So if an asset has a joint owner or a beneficiary designation, a will not control that asset. A trust, on the other hand, is kind of like a corporation. It's a separate entity. So you don't need to go to probate court. You can name your successor trustee, and any assets that are in a trust can be handled by the trustee. So there's a couple of different ways, and you don't even need a trust, right? So I talked about beneficiary designations. So if you've got, 2 kids and you want your kids to split everything equally after you're gone, you can have them on as beneficiaries. One of the questions that I get a lot is, well, I don't have enough assets to have an estate plan. I don't need a trust. I don't need a will because I only have a bank account, a car, and a house. But the reality is that the less you have, the more important it is to plan. If you don't have a plan, you're going to wind up paying a lawyer to go through probate court, which is expensive and time consuming. And you allow a judge to make decisions if you didn't make those decisions before. So it's really not an ideal situation. So if you have the ability to transfer things by beneficiary designation, that's a good way to do it too. There are some potential pitfalls in that scenario, but at the end of the day, the less you have, the more you need to plan.
Thanks, Matt. And I hear this often, and you referenced it in terms of not wanting to go to probate or not wanting to go to probate court. And you indicated that it takes time. What is the average time for a probate court proceeding from beginning to end?
Good question. So probate is basically a public court case. So just like if you were going to file a complaint against someone, you have to file the initial paperwork, a judge gets assigned, someone is appointed to stand in the shoes of the deceased person. We call that the personal representative. And then there's a bunch of rules that you have to follow in probate in order to process the estate. So as far as timing goes, it's a minimum of 5 months. So you have to publish notice that has to stay open to any creditors or potential creditors for 120 days. And then there's another mandatory 28-day waiting period after that. So if everything goes perfectly and smooth and there are no issues and you're able to work through everything, 5 months is the minimum. But I've been doing this for a long time, over 20 years. And I'll tell you that the average time is probably somewhere around 12 months. Because the personal representative that's appointed, it's not their full-time job. They've got other commitments, other family things. And so they're busy living their lives and they're doing the administration when they can. So they're cleaning out the house, on the weekends or after work. And it just takes a lot longer. So people say to me, why don't I want to go through probate? People think they don't want to go through probate, but they don't necessarily know why. Well, one is, to your point, Paul, the timing of it. It takes a substantial amount of time to do it. The second thing is it's expensive, right? If you're going to use a lawyer, I'd say the average cost to administer a trust or an estate is somewhere between 4 and 7% of the value of the assets. So if you've got a house worth $100,000, it's going to cost you thousands of dollars to get it where you wanted it to go if you did not plan. And then the third element of probate that people want to avoid is the publicness of it. So just like anybody can go down and look up a court case, you can go and look up a trust or an estate. So, and in an estate, you have to file an inventory and you have to show an accounting. And so everybody can kind of see what you had or what went through probate. And that's something people typically don't like. The other comment I get a lot is that people, I'm not that interesting. So why would they want to be, looking up the stuff I had? But the reality is it's not just your neighbors. It's always the bad actors, right? So they're looking for people who've passed away to steal their social security number, to access a bank account and steal any money, because they feel like those situations are less combative, right? The person's dead, so who's going to complain about the money? So probate's good in a lot of areas and for certain situations, but overall, the average person wants to avoid probate for those reasons.
Definitely, that sounds like a nightmare, Matt. We could probably spend an hour or two discussing all of the finer points of that, but we do need to move on due to time constraints. And
Sure.
So why don't we move on? Lindsey told me this morning that it was Long-Term Awareness Month, and which is kind of timely with what we have here. And Long-Term Care Awareness Month leads to the discussion of assisted living and those type of decisions that need to be made. And those have to be tough decisions as well. Can you provide us a little bit of a background, Matt, on what discussions should be held concerning long-term planning or long-term care planning?
Yeah, absolutely. So long-term care planning is similar to estate plan in that it's really just a plan, right? It's how you're going to take care of the things you need to take care of if you can't do it all on your own. And so long-term care really is, some people are healthy up until the end, and other people live for a long time with some infirmity or some issue. We talked about dementia and Alzheimer's and things like that. So really it's having a plan to care for you if you can't care for yourself. And those plans range from, I'm going to rely on my family member. I've got an adult child who doesn't work and can come take care of me. To I've got, a cousin that I'm going to go live with. It doesn't necessarily have to be a formal plan, but it has to be something that will allow you to continue to get the things you need, your daily activities of living done in a regular fashion. But long-term care, at some point, you may need to get professional help, right? You may need to get assisted living, a nursing home, something of in that regard. And the question always comes up, how do I pay for that? So there's a couple of different ways. One is really the private pay. You save your money, you work your whole life and you save your money in case of a rainy day. That's a rainy day. So you can private pay, save your money and use the money that you saved to pay for the facility that you have to go into, or to have professionals or people come into your house to help you if you don't have that family situation. Another option to pay for this is long-term care insurance. Long-term care insurance can be very helpful, but it's not a silver bullet. So long-term care insurance is just like a life insurance policy or a health insurance policy, where you get the policy, you pay premiums monthly, annually, quarterly, whatever it is. And then at some point, if you do need to help pay for an assisted living facility, the long-term care policy will jump in and take care of that. But it's not 100% pay. It's important that you work with a professional to evaluate what benefits are available. Most policies that I see have some type of limit, where it's either a daily limit or a monthly limit of what the policy will pay. So the average nursing home in Michigan is somewhere around between $8,000 and $9,000. If you need living and you need assistance with daily living, it's usually $8,000 to $9,000 in Michigan, and that number will move a month. Yes, And so typically what I've seen is policies that'll cover up to, $5,000 or $6,000, and then you private pay the rest. So basically it's a combination of private pay and the insurance policy. So it makes your dollars go further. You can stay longer with the money that you saved because you've got an assistance there in paying that premium.
Couple of questions related to that. I don't mean to
Yep.
interrupt, but the long-term care insurance, is that something that the premiums are higher the older you are when you obtain the policy?
Yeah, so it depends. Typically, yes. They usually won't give it to you before you're 49. So between 49 and somewhere in your 70s, each company has their own rules. But that's typically the longer you wait, the higher the premium. If you've got a past history of certain things, that your premium might be higher. So you'll want to check with several companies to get some pricing on that if that's something you're interested in. But yeah, so that's one of the things. And nowadays, what they're doing is they're combining policies. So you could have a life insurance policy with a long-term care component, but it changes regularly. So we do encourage people to get with professionals who do this to find out what their options are. It's a good option if you need it, but it's like insurance, right? You pay the premiums hoping you never have to use it. Last thing I just want to mention before you move on, Paul, is everybody asked me about Medicaid. So what happens if you don't have any money, right? And Medicaid is the federal partnership with the states to administer a health insurance policy that would pay for long-term care needs. So Medicaid is funded by the federal government, but managed by the individual states. So each state has their own rules. But generally, in order to be eligible for Medicaid, it's kind of the insurance of last resort. You have to have less than $2,000 in countable assets. So that, and I won't get into all the details of that, but you basically have to be unable to support yourself any longer. And once you get to that point, then Medicaid will kick in and they will pay for what that long-term care policy would have paid for. But they pay for the whole thing and they will pay for it indefinitely. However, there are some restrictions on it, like the financial side of stuff, your Social Security, I think you can keep $60 of whatever income you have. The rest of your income goes to defray that. So it's not from a financial standpoint, it's really not a good plan. But Medicaid will take care of you. If you private pay and you spent your last dollar, they will kick in and go. You just got to make sure that the facility you're in accepts Medicaid.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. We need to move on. That's very informative. And certainly if anybody has a question specifically that they would like to ask, put it in the chat. And if there's time allowed, we'll get to it. Otherwise, we can follow up after the presentation today. Lindsey, I got a question for you. You're off the hook now, or you're on the hook now, I should say. The importance of cybersecurity. Again, and if kind of the theme here is that you're sitting around the Thanksgiving table and somebody brings up a story that grandma or grandpa got scammed on something related to cybersecurity, not because they're feeble-minded or anything, just because these are pretty strong organizations, are pretty deceptive, and they can trick anybody. And someone who hasn't grown up with the internet and all of its benefits and pitfalls may fall subject to that. Can you discuss that and what types of issues you're looking for there and can recommend to people?
Yeah, thanks. I think obviously technology has evolved over the last 30 or so years. And so the education of how that technology has changed is often at least best understood by the generation, millennials, that grew up with it. So when we're talking with our parents, with our grandparents around a table, the assumption that everybody's on the same level playing field about technology isn't correct. And I think for all of us, the personal and financial transactions that are occurring online are really the space that we want to promote, having, cybersecurity at the forefront when considering everything is on our phone and everything is so easily accessible with one click. So protecting that personal information in those settings is going to be really crucial to helping your elderly loved ones understand, because oftentimes they are more vulnerable to those scams. So, for example, phishing scams are something that's impacting all of us, whether that be in our emails or phone calls, text messages, even recently. And social media platforms seem to be where this is really taking off in the context of our families and loved ones. People create a fake profile, or whether that be somebody you don't recognize, or someone creates a fake profile of your family or friend. And oftentimes they'll start asking for personal information in some type of direct messaging platform. And I think it's crucial in these moments that we check in with our loved ones, say, hey, did you make a new Facebook account? Or be wary of giving away any type of personal information, like, hey, can you give me your address again? If that seems suspicious to, not something your grandma or parent would typically ask in that format, encouraging people to have conversations with their families, follow up on that to reduce the risk of potentially breaching that information. And sometimes I think we all fall victim to judging our family and friends instead of offering helpful advice when it comes to our senior loved ones' internet usage. So that's really, this time of year is a good time to remember that and check in, because social media is scary for everybody, and helping everyone use it safely is really crucial.
When you say check in, do you mean check in to what the elderly person is doing on the internet? And you gain access to their page? Are those the type of things that people can do?
Yeah, it really depends. I don't think co-owned Facebook pages are entirely a foreign concept, but I guess what I was meaning is, I get notifications myself that my aunts had made a new Facebook, and double checking with them by calling them at the number I know and trust and say, hey, did you delete your old page? Or now I'm seeing two different pages for you. What's the situation? It could be harmless. It could be they forgot their password. They didn't know how to cancel their previous account, whatever. But it also could not be. And, these cyber criminals know what audience they're targeting. And often it's our elderly loved ones on social media to create fake pages and then get some type of personal information from their loved ones and followers.
As you mentioned earlier, not only was it long-term care awareness month, but it's also International Fraud Awareness Week.
Yeah.
Could you, and I didn't know we had so many months and weeks. I
know.
only usually pay attention to the National Donut Day or Pizza Day or something like that. But in any event, do you have any insight in terms of fraud awareness that can be helpful in dealing with elderly people?
Yeah. Again, our elderly loved ones are often at risk, and especially this time of year for investment scams. And these types of scams are promising some type of unusually high return with little to no risk, like invest in this company or this good or product, and somehow you can enhance your retirement funds, is often is the tagline. And scammers are using persuasive tactics, especially with the group of people that are seeking retirement, and creating this sense of urgency and exclusivity, like you were personally selected for this particular investment opportunity. And I would caution against those opportunities, of course, when they arise. Some may be legitimate, but oftentimes it somehow results in you giving personal information to an unknown party, and then cybersecurity issues and breaches occur after that. So legitimate investments are often going to come with clear, accessible documentation and transparency from what business is funding this or offering this opportunity. But I think at this time of year, when we're all together with our aunts and uncles and grandparents and loved ones, to check in if one of these people share with you details of this unique opportunity being offered to them, and do your research if they have not, to see if that's a scam, because there's so many group forum pages where people can share their experiences and let you know, hey, this person reached out to me and it's a bad actor, don't give them your information. And even the SEC and FTC, local law enforcement, all of these avenues through our government, local, federal, state level, are open to filing police reports on your behalf for investment scams, because it is fraud, it is a crime, and you have the option to take action if you've fallen victim to that, or to encourage and help your loved one if they have. So yeah, this is a terrible time of year for those, and be on the lookout.
Thank you, Lindsay. We have one final question, and we can get to some of the questions that have been asked in the chat. And I'm just going to ask this of both of you in terms of what can we do to encourage the elderly to protect their digital assets? And what are digital assets, and how can they protect them? What's the best thing that you would recommend?
Matt, you go ahead and take it, and I'll wrap it up with it if you want to.
Okay, sure. So there's a lot of things you can do. One is make sure that you have a location where you keep your passwords or an electronic password keeper, and give somebody the information to access your digital content. So most people just need to access the phone. You get your email on the phone, you get your social media on the phone, all your personal stuff is on the phone. So you don't have to give anybody your phone code, but you need to write it down and say, okay, if something happens to me, this is you go here and you find the code. You just need to have that people to be able to access the digital content. We actually provide a document for our regular estate planning clients that actually authorizes somebody, if we can, to access our digital content. So that's a newer thing that we've been doing, but it's important to have that piece of paper written down. So powers of attorney, somewhere it needs to give someone the authority to access your online digital content. Like I said, you don't have to give it to them right now. I mean, I use a password keeper. I encourage all my clients to use a password keeper. So I wrote down you just need one password for that. So I wrote down the one password. I gave it to my assistant. I gave it to my wife, and they've got that and they can access it. So you need to have a plan in order to access that phone, which is where most people keep their stuff.
Yeah. And for those of you that already have estate planning documents, or the loved one you're thinking about sharing this information with, you can revise and update those documents if you didn't already previously account for digital assets like Matt's talking about. I think folks don't always realize that your social media accounts technically are your digital asset, as well as shared online photo albums or online banking accounts. I think having a reframed look at the world now that technology has evolved so much that our online presence is actually valuable too, is important to really encourage your loved ones to think about how to update those plans or to include those, like Matt said, when you're starting your estate planning document journey. So it's definitely a new age and a new world, but it's one piece that can really help you navigate that complex digital landscape at end of life for your loved ones.
Dan, I'll just add on one more thing. Before, when somebody died, when I first started practicing, we would just publish a notice, or we'd get the mail forwarded for like a year, and you'd be able to figure everything out, right? You get the quarterly statements, the annual statements, the monthly statements. But nowadays, people are getting so much through email. They're getting financial statements through email. So having access to the email is probably one of the most key things in this day and age that you got to make sure you're able to do.
Yeah.
I can imagine, and in terms of keeping track of passwords, I mean, I know that I struggle with that every day because my password always seems to change or be required to be changed. So if there's a way that can be accomplished efficiently, that would be very helpful. We have one question, and actually, if we had time, we would have been able to cover this earlier. Matt, can you discuss the basics of the power of attorney?
Sure. So power of attorney is where you give someone else the authority to act on your behalf legally and financially. There's two main types. There's a springing, one that works only if you're incapacitated and can't act on your behalf. And then there's an immediate power of attorney that allows, as soon as you sign the document, allows someone to act legally and financially on your behalf. The document literally gives them the authority to do anything you could do in the world of legal and financial. So signing contracts, accessing bank accounts, basically anything you can do. That document ceases to work upon death. So you're only giving that person the authority that you have. So once you pass away, you no longer have that authority. So it doesn't work past death. It only works during your lifetime.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks to both of you, and thanks for everybody for attending today. Our next session will be on December 11th at 12 o'clock. And we will be Gabby Lawrence and Jackie Dupler to discuss family law issues during the holidays. So we have kind of a holiday theme family law issues that arise during that time of year. If anybody has any questions and follow-up, please feel free to reach out to the three of us, particularly Lindsey and Matt, because they know more about this than I do. And their email addresses and their numbers are posted in the chat. So thanks for everybody for coming today.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Lindsey.
Thanks, Paul, and thank you, everybody.